I'm about to share something she never imagined I would say out loud. She walked out on a Thursday. The house felt too still, an emptiness so loud it felt like my own soul had packed up and left before I did. That's the feeling I had standing in the hallway, staring at the thin ribbon of light leaking from her closet. One hanger swung there like it missed its dress. I stood holding that ridiculous little self-care weekend itinerary she'd forgotten, covered in tiny flowers and a yoga icon, and I knew exactly what it was. A polished story, a performance, a lie inked in lavender. I didn't break down. I didn't freak out. I went into our bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed she hadn't touched in 4 nights, and started to unplug my phone charger. That charger became the first thing I packed. She was already on her way to some beach house with her so-called girls when the realization hit me hard. I was the only one still trying. I begged for her time, and she handed it to Instagram. I asked for honesty and got sarcasm. I gave her my loyalty, and everything else went to him. Don't worry, we'll get to him. But first, rewind a bit. 2 weeks before she left, I heard laughter coming from the guest bathroom. She didn't know I'd come home yet. I paused in the hallway. She was on speakerphone, lighter and livelier than I'd heard her in months, maybe even years. "Babe," she giggled. He wouldn't know passion if it smacked him in the face with a candle at dinner. Then there was silence and a low male chuckle from the other end. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited until she hung up. Then I walked in and asked if she wanted Thai or Mexican. She muttered without looking up. I already ate. That's when I stopped being her husband and became her roommate with Wi-Fi. So when she packed a beach bag full of lies and slipped into that red bikini, just for the spa, I finally did something she didn't expect. I moved out. Quietly, deliberately. While she sipped smoothies wrapped in another man's hoodie, I packed up 10 years of pretending I hadn't noticed. But I didn't leave empty-handed in the usual way. I left something that would stick with her. When she walked through the front door 3 days later and found it, silence screamed like never before. I barely slept the night after she left. Not because I missed her. I'd spent months lying beside her and feeling lonelier than I ever had. But because for the first time in years, I was making a choice that didn't hinge on hoping she'd change. I was done hoping. Hope had become a sell. I started small. I listed everything I needed to take. Passport, social security card, laptop, a few favorite shirts, my grandfather's watch, the one thing of actual value that her sleek minimalist taste hadn't replaced. Standing in our kitchen, still staged in that sterile modern chic she adored, I thought about how absurd it was that the man who paid for most of it hardly had any say in the look. This place used to have color. Now it was all white, gray, and cold, the same way she'd been toward me. I pulled out my duffel and packed with calm, steady motions. No panic, no rush. She wouldn't be back until Monday. I had time. But I didn't want to take everything. I didn't need everything. I only wanted what still felt mine, which, surprisingly, wasn't much. What I focused on instead was what I would leave. There was a letter, not a goodbye note, that felt too trite. This was more like holding up a mirror. I wrote down everything I'd swallowed over the last 3 years. Every quiet night, every compliment she brushed off, every holiday ruined by her moods, every flirtatious remark she laughed off in front of me like I was being overly sensitive. I filled page after page with the truth. Not dramatic, not cruel, just raw and impossible to deny. At the very end, I slipped in a photo. It wasn't of the two of us. It was one I'd found on her old tablet months earlier and emailed to myself without her knowing. A picture of her on a couch that wasn't ours, wearing a hoodie I'd never seen, her lips pressed to someone else's cheek. It wasn't explicit. The intimacy was clear enough. She never confessed. I didn't need that confession anymore. I had something better. Clarity. Before zipping my bag, I stood in our shared closet one last time. I looked at her dresses and shoes, the same pairs I'd queued up to buy for her birthday, the shoes she wore to dinners where she scrolled under the table while I tried to make conversation. Then something almost strange hit me. I wasn't angry. I was simply worn out. So I walked out, locked the door behind me, and left the key on the kitchen island beside the letter and the photo, with one sticky note that read, "Read this before you pretend to miss me." I checked into a cheap extended stay on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but the sheets were clean, the air smelled like real coffee instead of sandalwood candles, and no one sighed when I walked into the room. 2 days of silence went by. Then she texted, "Where are you? Are you okay? Did something happen? Not, I miss you. Please come back." just puzzled, like she was the one abandoned. I didn't answer. Not yet. And then everything got messy. She didn't actually go on that girl's trip alone. And thanks to a friend of a friend, someone I didn't even know had my back, I was about to learn who she'd really been with. Trust me, you'll want to hear what she said when she saw my letter, because it wasn't tears. It wasn't guilt. It was worse. She didn't even finish it. That's what her third message said 2 hours after the first. I couldn't even finish reading it. What is this, Harland? Are you trying to humiliate me? She skipped the parts where I poured my soul out, the parts where I listed every single instance. She breezed past the memory of how she used to hold my hand in the car. And now I was supposed to beg for a text reply? No. What disturbed her was the photo, the moment she realized someone had seen her in his hoodie, when she realized I wasn't merely guessing anymore. And you know what? That was exactly the point. I didn't move out to punish her, not to be theatrical or teach a lesson. I left because I was done being invisible. Somewhere along the line my silence had become complicity, and I refused to keep helping her pretend everything was fine. That friend of a friend I mentioned? His name's Colby. We weren't close, just two guys who ended up next to each other at a cookout once while our wives got wine drunk and pretended to enjoy one another. We swapped numbers after commiserating about our shared inability to assemble IKEA furniture. I hadn't texted him in months until he messaged out of nowhere. Hey man, don't know if this is something you'd want to hear, but I saw Kendra last night, not where she said she'd be. I froze. My first instinct was to ignore it. I didn't want more pain. But curiosity is a cruel thing, and a part of me still needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. So I asked, where was she? His next message came with a photo. Kendra at a rooftop bar, hair curled, wearing that red dress. She'd come back weeks ago, standing close to a tall guy in a tight navy shirt, his arm just a touch too familiar around her waist. I didn't recognize him, but I didn't have to. Colby said, that's DNE. He's a gym friend of hers. Pretty sure he's not married. Funny, right? She'd once told me she hated guys who pump themselves up on Instagram. DNE's whole profile looked like a protein shake exploded. The puzzle pieces clicked. Late nights at the gym, those work calls, the way she came home buzzing like she'd been fed someone else's attention. It wasn't a one-off mistake. It wasn't an accident. She'd built a whole second life without me. And yet she had the nerve to write me. We were having problems. Harland, you're not blameless here. No, I wasn't completely blameless. I let things slide too long, that's on me. But I wasn't the one slipping away under a curtain of lies and filtered captions. I didn't reply with anger. I didn't blow up her phone. I didn't beg. I let her stew because I had a plan. And parts of that plan were already in motion. I quietly started changing everything behind the scenes. The lease, removing my name, unlinking my bank account, getting off the family Netflix she used to marathon while too tired to talk. I changed the password and renamed the profile. I'd swallowed years of hurt in silence. This felt like a tiny victory. The best part? She didn't know where I was. That drove her insane. Not because she missed me, but because she could no longer control the story. For once, she wasn't the one leaving. I was. That wasn't in her plan. What happened next? Kendra finally called me, and what she said was nothing I'd expected. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She offered me a deal, and it was worse than anything I'd imagined. The phone barely rang twice before I picked it up, though I told myself I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I guess part of me still wanted to hear her voice, not because I missed it, but to hear what she sounded like when she realized I wasn't going to play the fool any longer. Kendra, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. There was a pause, a shallow breath, and then she spoke. What came out wasn't shock or remorse. It was strategy. We don't have to make this ugly, she started. Not, where are you? Not, can we talk? Just business, like a negotiation over a lease break or canceling a gym membership. Her tone was clipped and deliberate. If I didn't know her, I might have thought she sounded calm, but I heard the tightness, the way her voice tried not to shake. Oh, I replied. Are we pretending it was beautiful before? She ignored me. I just think there's a way we can walk away from this without ruining each other's lives, she said, as if she hadn't already shredded mine one lunch date at a time. I held my silence until it became uncomfortable. Kendra hated silence. She always filled it with background noise, passive-aggressive jabs, or calls to people she barely liked. Silence meant confrontation, and she avoided that like the plague. Then she made her pitch, her deal. "If you're not planning to come back, fine," she said. "But there's no reason we have to go nuclear. I can stay in the house until the lease ends. We don't tell our families what happened. No messy stories. We both move on quietly, dignified, civil." I laughed, an involuntary, cracked sound that came out more like a cough, because that was it. That was her damage control plan. Sweep everything under the rug and walk away like it was just an expired subscription. "Kindra," I said, "you're talking about our marriage like it's a group project we're turning in for a C-." Then she sighed, not the sad kind, the annoyed kind, and said, "Look, Harland, you and I both know it hasn't been working for a long time. I tried. You stayed. But that's not the same thing. It's not my fault if I needed something you couldn't give." That one hit hard because in a small, ugly way, it had truth to it. I had given up on myself. I stopped pushing back. I stopped asking for affection. I accepted the quiet and the cold. Deep down, I'd started to believe I didn't deserve more. But now I knew differently. I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up. I sat in that shabby motel room with its humming mini fridge and the flickering light, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel diminished. I felt angry, not bitter, not vengeful, but awake. And in that moment, I decided that if Kindra wanted to pretend this was mutual, fine. But she no longer got to control the narrative. Not anymore. There was one more thing I hadn't told her, something she would never expect. I knew exactly who DNE was, and I wasn't the only one watching. DNE wasn't some random gym guy. I wish he had been. That would have made things easier to swallow. But life doesn't hand you neat betrayals. It twists the knife slowly in ways you don't predict. I knew him, not intimately, but enough. He was the guy who helped me change a tire outside a CVS last year. The guy who laughed a little too loudly at my joke during the community barbecue. The man who shook my hand with both hands like he respected me, who looked me in the eye and said, "You've got a great one, man. You're lucky." And all the while, he was probably thinking, "I'll text her the second you leave." That realization felt like a second betrayal layered on top of the first. I hadn't just lost my wife. I'd lost my dignity in front of a man who watched me fall apart from a distance, fully aware he was part of it. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that someone else knew before I did. That someone, and this might sound crazy, was my landlord, Walt. 60-something, a touch hard of hearing, forever in flannel even when it was blazing outside. We weren't friends, just polite small talk when rent was due or when we clipped the hedges. But after I moved out and officially ended the lease, he called. I figured paperwork. Not even close. I didn't want to get involved, Harland. I really didn't, he said. But you're a decent guy and I saw things that didn't sit right with me. He paused, sounding uneasy, then added, I saw your wife bring someone to the house a few times. Never you. I asked when. Every other Friday for months, he answered. That was the night Kendra always said she had after-hours meetings. I believed her. I'd even offered to meal prep so she wouldn't be exhausted when she got home. Meanwhile, Walt had watched them come and go, her and DNE walking into my place like it was a hotel suite, laughing, holding hands once, kissing at the door another time. Walt kept his mouth shut until now. People's marriages are messy, he said. Maybe you two had an arrangement, or maybe you didn't want to know. That last line lingered. Maybe you didn't want to know. And for a while that was true. Maybe deep down, I'd felt something was off and chose the comfort of pretending instead of facing the pain. But now I knew, and I couldn't unknow. I thanked Walt, told him I appreciated his honesty, and hung up. Then I sat in that motel room with the lights off and replayed every Friday night I'd spent waiting. Every cold dinner, every text left unanswered, every, I love you, I said out of routine and got back a distracted, It was time. I logged into her iPad. She hadn't bothered to log out before she left. She didn't think I knew the passcode, but I did. It was still our wedding anniversary date. A bitter little joke, considering how quickly she'd rewritten our vows in her head. Messages, emails, photos, everything I needed was there. One email thread jumped out like a siren. Subject: "You free next Friday? I'll make sure he's not around." I didn't open the attachments. I didn't have to. I took screenshots. All of them. Not for revenge, not for the internet, but as proof for myself. When someone gaslights you long enough, you start to doubt your own pain. I needed tangible evidence to hold and say, "No, this happened. I'm not crazy." Then I found something even more chilling. An unsent draft tucked away in her email called Harland. "If you ever find out." The first line read, "I never wanted to hurt you, but I didn't know how to tell you I wasn't in love anymore." My stomach flipped. I read it 10 times because it sounded rehearsed, like a speech written months in advance for the collapse she'd already planned. She'd ended things in her head long before she packed a single bag. So I sat there, breathing shallow, hands wobbling a bit, and did the one thing left I could control. I wrote a reply. No swearing, no threats, no theatrics. Just one line. "I read your draft. Glad you wrote it. You'll need it soon, but not for me." I sent it that night. Then I booked a one-way ticket. Where to? That's for later. I was done chasing closure, but I wasn't done reclaiming my life. I thought the worst was behind me. Thought I'd seen the whole picture. Turns out I'd only watched the trailer. What came next pulled the rug out again. Only this time it wasn't Kendra doing it. It was someone I never expected to hear from. Her best friend, Molly. We'd known each other for years but weren't close. Loud, sharp-tongued, the kind of woman who judged a brunch with mimosas. She once called me too sensitive because I asked Kendra not to post something personal online. I always assumed she disliked me. So when my phone buzzed with her name, I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Molly tended to know everything. I answered. "Hey." Her voice wasn't the Molly I knew. It was low, careful. She hesitated, then said words that landed like bricks. "Harland, I need to tell you something." I know I should have said it a long time ago. I stayed silent and let her keep going. "Kendra has been lying to you far longer than you think. It wasn't just DNA. He's recent. There was another guy 2 years ago, a co-worker. Before that, someone from a retreat in Denver. I didn't want to get involved. Now she's telling people you emotionally abandoned her, and that's not true. I saw how much you tried. She's rewriting history, and I can't pretend that's okay." I leaned forward in the motel chair, my mouth dry. 2 years, 3 different men. "She told you?" I finally asked. "She doesn't need to," Molly said. "She brags when she drinks. Says stuff like, Harland would never leave. He's too scared to start over. She laughs when people call you loyal, like that's a flaw." A lump formed in my throat, that bitter, burning kind you get when reality strips away another layer. I wasn't just betrayed. I was being made fun of, turned into the safe option, the placeholder she came back to after playing house with someone else. Molly apologized for not speaking up sooner, saying she thought I knew, or worse, that she thought maybe I was okay with it. That line shattered something inside me. How broken must I have seemed for someone to assume I was fine with being used? I ended the call and stared out the motel window as rain drizzled down. Not cinematic, just a soft hush that made everything feel slow. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not because I wanted her back. Not from longing. I cried because I finally accepted the truth. This wasn't a marriage quietly falling apart. It was a demolition I'd been standing inside, convinced I could hold up the beams by myself. While I sat there weighed down, I got an email from Kendra. Subject: "Let's meet one last time." The message was brief. "If you've decided to leave, I won't stop you, but I deserve the chance to explain. Just once, face to face. I'll be home tomorrow. Please." I stared at that message for what felt like an hour. Part of me wanted to vanish, block her, disappear. The other, the exhausted, battered part, wanted to look her in the eye one last time to see if any guilt remained. So I replied, "Okay, tomorrow, 11 a.m., but don't expect me to stay long." Then I packed and waited. Not for answers or closure, just for the final page of a book I should have closed years ago. Walking up to our front door felt unreal, like I was moving through a warped simulation where the house I'd lived in for a decade belonged to someone else. I held the spare key in my hand for 30 seconds before I put it in the lock. When the latch clicked, something in my chest clicked, too. The last gear grinding forward on a machine I no longer wanted to run. She was already inside. I could tell before I even stepped in by the scent of that overpriced candle she lit for guests. Like this was a polite dinner party, even though everything between us was broken. I shut the door and didn't speak. She stood by the kitchen, mug in hand, hair curled, soft makeup, that pale blue sweater she knew I liked. It all felt staged, like she'd dressed for a job interview she'd already quit. "Harland," she said with a smile that was more a grimace. "Thanks for coming." I looked at her not with hope or hurt, but the way you stare at a photo of a place you once lived. Distant, detached, a memory that no longer feels like yours. "You said you wanted to talk, so talk," I said. She seemed surprised by my tone. Maybe she'd expected me to beg or fold. That man was gone. He left the day she kissed DNE at our front door while I was buying groceries. "I just want to explain," she began. "I know what I did was wrong. I should have told you sooner, but I was scared. Things between us haven't felt right for a long time. You were pulling away." I cut her off. "No," I said. "I was shrinking. There's a difference." She blinked mid-sip, unsure how to answer. I kept going. "You talk about fear, Kendra. What about me? Do you know what it's like to lie next to someone every night and feel like you're dying in silence? To ask for connection and be called needy? To watch the person you love laugh harder with strangers than they ever laughed with you?" "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "You meant it, Kendra. Maybe not at first, but you chose this again and again." She opened her mouth and closed it. Tears welled, but I didn't trust them. Not after the draft in her email. Not after Mollery told me this wasn't just DNE. I'd been living in a ghost town while she built sandcastles with every new thrill. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said softly. I let out a laugh. Not loud or cruel, just exhausted. "But you did," I said. "You hurt me in every way that matters. And now you want me to sit here and bless your mistakes? Wrap them in forgiveness so you can feel better walking away from the wreckage you caused." She started to cry properly then. It probably looked tragic. It might have worked on someone else. But I'd seen the real Kendra, the one who rolled her eyes when I talked about my day, who called me emotionally fragile for asking why she stopped saying I love you, who mocked me behind my back. "I know I've made mistakes," she said, voice cracking. "But you were never there for me emotionally either. You played the victim before anything even happened." There it was, the last attempt to flip my pain back onto me. One final twist of the blade. I stood, reached into my bag, and pulled out a plain white envelope, setting it on the table. "What's this?" she asked, small. "Copies of everything," I said. "The emails, the photos, my formal request to separate our finances, and a list of my things. I'll be back in 2 days to collect them. After that, you won't see me again." She stared at the envelope like it was scorching the wood. "This is really it?" she asked. "You're just walking away." "You walked away first," I replied. "I'm just finally following." She said nothing, frozen, tears still falling. I didn't feel guilty or mean. I felt free. I turned to go, paused, looked back once, and said the only line left to say. "You were right, Kendra. I was predictable, predictably loyal, predictably patient, predictably forgiving. Not anymore." Then I walked out. But what waited outside was a twist I never expected. I stepped onto the sidewalk expecting nothing cinematic. Just air, sharp and unfamiliar. Parked by the curb was a car I didn't know. The window rolled down, and it was Colby. The same Colby who'd first sent me that rooftop photo. He gave me a nod like we'd just come off a battlefield. "You all right?" he asked. I answered honestly. "No, but I think I will be." He said he'd been driving by to check on me. Had a feeling she might try to spin the story and didn't want me to walk out into that alone. I didn't realize how much I needed someone like that until he showed up. No sermons, no pity, just presence. We grabbed coffee, nothing fancy, not deep, just two tired guys at a booth talking about everything but her. The weather, football, whether oat milk is actually milk. It sounds trivial, but it grounded me. The world outside of Kendra still existed. That night, I didn't go back to the motel. I drove out to a small cabin I'd booked an hour away on a whim. That little wooden box in the woods gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet. For 3 days, I didn't check my phone. I read, hiked, and wrote a list of things I wanted to do. Not someday, but soon. I didn't spiral. I healed slowly, piece by piece. And then something wild happened. I started to smile again. Not because I found someone new, not because I got revenge, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't living inside someone else's version of my life. I was free. Messy. Me. And you know what? I liked that guy. These days, I don't pretend everything's perfect. Healing is weird and uneven, but I moved into a small place with windows that actually let sunlight in. The real kind, not filtered through designer curtains. I joined a local writing group. I even adopted a dog. His name's Benny, and he snores louder than anyone I know. Most importantly, I stopped asking, what did I do wrong? And started asking, what do I want next? That question saved me. Thanks for sticking with me through all 8 parts of this story. If you've ever walked away from something or someone that was quietly breaking you, I hope this reminded you that leaving isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you'll ever do. Tell me in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. Have you ever had a wake-up call like mine? You've been watching Frutti cheats where the truth doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to be real. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And if you're healing right now, know you're not alone.